Today's guest has a powerful story of going from a resident to CEO. John Carlson is now the CEO of Mark Taylor, but he started off as a resident of one of their properties. Now, he's got an incredible story of going from resident up to CEO, but he talks to us about the perseverance it took, some of the obstacles that he had to overcome, and really about creating a company culture where he could not only grow and thrive himself, but help others do the same. If you want to learn how to grow and scale starting from the bottom, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Check it out right here on Multifamily Insights. You probably got interested in real estate for the cash flow, the tax advantages, the equity appreciation, and the long-term wealth creation, not for the 2 a.m. emergency maintenance calls. But let's face it, maintenance can be the biggest headache when it comes to building up your real estate portfolio. And that's why I want to tell you about a new property management software called Hemlane. See, Hemlane is more than your typical software. It's really like having a property management support system. First, Hemlane provides 24/7 repair coordination. They have a network of vetted maintenance technicians and professionals in your area to handle repair and maintenance your property may need. Second, Hemlane helps you advertise your listings and even connects you to licensed agents to help find and place tenants. And third, Hemlane is ranked #1 by Gartner with an average of 4.8 star reviews on repair coordination. Learn how Hemlane can help you manage your properties with 100% transparency and control without the administrative work. And as a Multifamily Insights listener, you will receive 25% off for 2 months when you sign up. Just go to hemlane.com, that's HEMLANE.com, and use Multifamily Podcast 25 as the promo code. Again, that's hemlane.com, or just click the link in the show notes. John Carlson is the CEO of Mark Taylor. With over 20 years of multifamily experience and an unmatched passion for multifamily housing, John has a wide range of industry knowledge on various topics that we're excited to talk about today. Let's welcome to the show, John Carlson.
Hello, John. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. It's always great to talk to another John. I went over your bio at a very high level. Take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps.
I went from resident to CEO, meaning I lived in Minnesota, grew up in Minnesota, born and raised, moved to Arizona when I was 21. I was an engineer and out of work. And when I think about that time frame, it was really impactful to me in that it was 2001 and the engineering world was kind of cratering at the time. And I found myself at this great apartment community in Chandler, Arizona, owned by Mark Taylor and developed. And I had no idea who Mark Taylor was. It was actually 2 guys. I come to find out, Jeff, Mark, Scott Taylor. And I think the quality of the management, how they treated their people, how they treated the residents was really impactful to me. And I really connected. And at some point in my early stay, the manager, Michelle Sinclair, approached me and said, "Hey, would you consider part-time leasing?" Because I was trying to find a role in my career path. And I said, "No way," with zero humility. I'm an engineer, pounding my chest. A week later, I came to my senses and said, "No, I think I should, check this out. I got to pay bills anyway. I got to pay my rent." And I started part-time leasing and absolutely loved the community, loved doing that. I loved the sales side of it. I love connecting with people. And that was really it for me. I was off to the races. I got a call, I think 6 months later, from an engineering firm. They said, "Hey, we still have your resume on file. Would you come in for an interview?" And I said, "No, thanks." It was like my, primal instinct. I said, "No, I'm going to figure out this real estate thing," and just stuck with it. And about 6 months after that, my girlfriend went back to Minnesota. So I was here by myself, and Mark Taylor really became the connection, the roots for me in Arizona. And here I am.
Man, I love this story, man. A lot of growth. You talked about being an engineer and being a resident at this apartment community, really enjoying living there and going from being a resident to helping with leasing and then ultimately deciding this is where you want to scale. And today you're sitting here as a CEO. So obviously you stuck with the firm and had a lot of growth there. But there's some gaps you definitely need to fill in, right? You talked about being a resident and going from a resident living in an apartment community to now being the CEO. That's a pretty drastic leap. fill in some of that for us, right? Like, how do you go from there? Obviously, I got you doing the leasing, but at what point did you kind of move to the other side to say, okay, now you're starting to, be more involved with some of the senior leadership and ultimately rise up the ranks?
Yeah, I think we were a real small company at the time, so it was helpful that I had access to, senior leaders, mentors, different folks within the industry. I think the other catapult, other than just, being curious, grinding, pushing myself, wanting to learn everything I could about real estate, was the ability to connect with folks that were participating in our business from a third party ownership perspective. All I mean by that is the organization really shifted to focus more on third party in the early 2000s. And the benefit for me, as I became an asset manager, was I was able to work with a lot of really talented, experienced folks on the ownership side. So think institutional clients like UBS, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, to individual investors, mom and pop shops, all of those things. I had, call it 6 to 10 different clients, every year. They would rotate in. There'd be some of the same clients over time, but I got so much access to great mentors, great skilled real estate folks. I'll say professional technicians in real estate that have really helped accelerate my career and knowledge base. So I think for anyone that's listening, when you can find access like that, you take advantage of it. And I go back to Lainey Miller from UBS, a longtime director. She had a multitude of assets across the country, different management companies. And I said, "Hey, Lainey," I was a manager at the time. I said, "Help me become your best manager." And she kind of laughed at me because I was brand new, right? And I really challenged myself to learn from her and grow. And I think that propelled me into thinking differently on the long term. And I'll just say, in that moment when I took that role, my first manager role, some of the folks within the company at the time said, "Oh, you don't want that. You don't want that job." I'm like, "What do you mean?" "Well, Laney's tough. UBS is tough." And looking back, I'm like, that was exactly what I needed. I needed that challenge, right? I had to put myself into an uncomfortable position to grow. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time. But she challenged me, pushed me, and really accelerated my career.
I think it's great to hear, right? You talk about putting yourself in uncomfortable situations so you can actually grow. But going back, there was something that clearly stood out, right? You talked about that first role. You were a resident, you are, an out of work engineer, and you get approached about being a leasing agent essentially. Why? Why did they approach you? Like, are you just hanging around the office? Did they know you were
Well,
unemployed and
that's
scared
that's
you
a
weren't going
great
to pay
question.
rent? Like, what led to that that offer?
Well, at the time, I'm going to date myself, but I was sending out faxes and emails to apply for different roles in my career path, and so I was in the office every day, and the staff was amazing. Bernie, Susan, Michelle. I mean, they were just fantastic to deal with. So I found myself maybe spending an hour working on my potential career, but also lingering, spending that extra hour talking to the staff. And I think that personal connection became obvious. And I've always been, jovial, friendly. I'm a people person. I like to, hang out with folks and connect. And I think there was certainly a connection there. And I didn't know exactly what it meant, but as I got to know more folks within the Mark Taylor organization, I really felt like there was a certain caliber of folks that I wanted to connect with more. And that was kind of the entree. I was spending more time in the office than I should.
I think it's great too, but there's some insights there, especially for our younger listeners, because sometimes, you know, what may feel like a hardship to us is really an opportunity. And people are always watching you. They're watching how you perform. They're watching what you do. And while you were unemployed, you were there. You were grinding. You were in the office trying to use that fax machine and sending out your stuff. And they were noticing, like, okay, this guy clearly he's trying. He's out here doing a great job trying. And whether he gets a job or not, we don't know. But that kind of effort, that kind of behavior, that's the kind of thing we're looking for. And it's important for us just to remember, how we show up is really important for other people to see us. So those little things matter, and you never know who's watching you at any moment in time or the opportunities that can be created based on that. So keeping that top of mind, I think, is really, really critical. And just being who you are, right? It's not something you can just turn on when you got the interview. I mean, that's fine, but it's way easier if you just make that a part of who you are. You were somebody who was out there grinding, trying to do everything you could, being curious, asking questions, and clearly they picked up on that early on. You're the CEO now, and that's kind of crazy to go from, just a resident to the CEO of the place you were staying. If you were, and I'm sure you have, but as you talk to junior people in the company, or you think back on, kind of John when he was first breaking into the real estate side and the property management side, what advice would you give that version of yourself or a younger person?
Certainly go through the process of failing with all of the things I did. I would just accelerate them because I just think it's such a valuable process, as you know, to learn and kind of curate yourself through that process. And I think back to if I was 25 again, I would focus a lot on my personal mission statement, which I have today, and really understanding what my goals, my personal focus areas would be, and then aiming up, as Jordan Peterson would say, and really focus in on what I'm trying to accomplish. And I'd say that there was a lot of luck involved for sure, but unknowingly, I think I did that. I didn't have specific purpose at the time, like, oh, this is what you should do, John, or here's your BHAGs, your big, hairy, audacious goals on an annual basis, monthly, weekly. So I wasn't good mechanically in focusing on that. So what I tell folks today is like the first thing I do, and I sit with every new hire group every Monday for about 45 minutes, meeting our new hire folks that come into Mark Taylor, regardless of what level. And I'll just say, hey, you should really think about, and we do this exercise in there, they'll do it for 15 minutes. They start their personal mission statement. Some have them, which is fantastic, so that they have a head start. But I ask them to think about that and really go back with pen and paper for the next 90 days. How does Mark Taylor influence them? What's their personal mission statement? It can be a blend of career, personal. It can be just career, just personal, but really get them thinking about what they're trying to achieve, because we're only here a short time. And, I think if I'm that person, I'm doing that first. And then I'm trying to see if my personal mission statement now connects, or at least I can dot line to Mark Taylor's mission and vision. If my goal as a person, I'm 25, I'm sitting in that room, I want to go build rockets. Well, you probably shouldn't be leasing or doing technician work at Mark Taylor. You should go a different way. And that's okay. I'm fine with that. But the folks that can see themselves connect to our mission, which is to create exceptional communities that invite, inspire, and feel like home, if they can somehow calibrate their mission statement and connect to ours, I think they'll be here a long time and be successful. And really what that comes back to is, can you connect to an organization with purpose? And that's the Hubert Jolly from Best Buy. You remember him, the CEO, for many years, and he talks about the human magic, the human connection. And I just think when an organization like ours, or any organization, if you can create a vision, mission, a set of principles that you must follow, and you have employees that can come in brand new to the organization and connect with purpose, that creates that flywheel effect, right? You start to accelerate the momentum of the organization. So, a long answer, John, but I think, going back, really think about your personal mission statement, think about your purpose, and be definitive with what you want to accomplish, and then get back to aiming high, right? Can you improve yourself every day? And I love the statement. There's an old quote. I don't know who created it, but comparison is the thief of joy. So when you think about someone sitting on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, or TikTok or Facebook or the gram, as my daughter calls it, a lot of that scrolling is you comparing yourself to other lives. And most often people put the best things of the day, week, or month on those posts, and it's an easy way to pull that joy away from yourself. So I think about comparing yourself to yesterday. And that's one of our principles, being better than yesterday. And if you can just aim up and just get better every day, man, I'm in my 40s now. You look back and you say, wow, I've accomplished a lot, or man, I got a lot of work to do. You can compare yourself to any stage, but when you aim high, I think there's a real chance of you being successful as an individual, husband, wife, whatever category you're looking at on the personal side. Aiming up matters.
Yeah, I love that, right? Just really getting clarity on what you want understanding your personal mission, taking the time to write that out. What are you trying to accomplish? What do you want in this world? Recognizing those things. Now you've got a little bit of a guiding star that can help you identify which opportunities might help you get there and which ones will not. So you're not maybe wasting a lot of time doing something that you don't have passion for or is not moving you closer towards your goals, and just taking accountability for where you're at and not comparing yourself to other people's journey. Really, really good insights of things that could help you get more traction and get more success in your business. You were talking earlier about, one of the things that helped you was working with Lanny over at UBS. And, when you get a chance to work with, institutional investors and working with so many different people, many of them operate and maybe have a little nuances that may be different from kind of that mom and pop owner or some folks who are starting out and maybe don't have all the resources. As you compare that, and think about maybe some of those mom and pop owners or, young, emerging syndicators, what are some lessons learned from those big institutional level investors that could inform ways to make decisions or ways to operate for those younger or newer investors?
I think with institutional clients specifically, they typically adhere very specifically and strictly to their investment thesis. All I mean by that, if you have a checkbox of 10 things, that project has to be in XYZ location. It meets the threshold. It has to be built by this year or beyond. It has to be a value add. All of those things. And I would just say if 8 out of 10 are checked on that box as you would think as an investment committee or someone going through that process, and they need 10, they say no. They don't kind of fudge or get emotional. It's a very stringent investment process. I think what I'll see with individual developers, owners at times, emotions can get in the way of your investment thesis, and you'll do things that will be counterproductive longer term. In the moment, it feels right. Like I want to do this deal, right? And I think that can get you into a lot of trouble. And so, when you're thinking about investing, just say you're going to buy your first, second home or first rental, really understand what you're trying to accomplish financially, understand, where you can succeed, where the failure points are initially as you underwrite and assess each deal, and don't compromise. Follow your strategy. And that will be, I think that'll put you in a much more successful light long term, because it's, you could have some things go right? You'll have a tailwind of the market. You might just get lucky and say, oh, I know I didn't follow my thesis, but man, appreciation happened in this market over the next 2 years. Things were great. Now I'm just going to run, I'm just going to buy deals, right? I'm almost invincible. And I think that's the fastest way to create your business or investment or your additional income. I think you got to stay true to your investment strategy, like an institutional group, and not get emotional when it comes to these type of processes and investments and underwritings.
Yeah, John, I think it's interesting, right? Because every time I, talk to institutional investors or have conversations like this, the one thing I always try to remember as well is they are in the business of protecting capital, right? They got their money. They are protecting what they have. For most smaller investors, they're trying to grow their capital. So to the point you're saying is like, hey, there's a strict adherence to the investing philosophy, whatever your strategy is, stick to it. For that person who's trying to protect capital, they may have things that are not as relevant for someone scaling, like, or that, hey, you got to take a little bit of risk, or you may need to have a little bit less, room there. But the importance of still being clear on your criteria and what you do and how you execute, that should not waver. And you should not start making exceptions just to do a deal because you haven't done a deal in 6 months or something like that. And I think that's the point of what you're getting at. While they have a different, lens to viewing opportunities, the reason they're successful and they're able to continue to grow is they know what they like. They have a reason for that criteria. They didn't just wake up and say, hey, we only like deals built in this year. Like, no, they probably looked across their portfolio, or they've had some bad experiences, or they looked across, the industry, and they've made a decision to say, hey, our risk profile increases when a deal looks like this. So let's eliminate that. And those are the things that I think get lost sometimes when we are trying to invest. And anytime I'm talking to new investors who haven't kind of gone through that or haven't had losses or bad deals, there's always some pushback because they don't have the scars. And we're trying to help people obviously avoid scars and learn from those mistakes. But talk to me more about that, especially for that person who, feels like they need to be more fluid in their deal criteria so that they can see more and ultimately buy more. 'Cause it's almost like a bit of a conflict of interest, not a conflict of interest, but a conflict because they feel like, hey, I just need to buy something versus obviously those groups who are protecting their capital are going to be really, really strict on what they buy.
Yeah, I've been through many cycles, going back to '01, GFC, '08, COVID. I mean, there's been lots of contraction and expansionary cycles. And what I've seen is the most disciplined folks typically went out. So if you think about real estate, I think the long-term objective is to be in the game, right? It's the infinite mindset. It's the infinite game. You want to be in real estate a long time. And I've seen lots of groups, either go bankrupt or get greedy, right? Greed gets attached to that when there's euphoric states of the market. And I think back to a Warren Buffett quote, if you're in the batter's box, it doesn't mean you have to swing at every pitch, right? You have to let some of the balls go. And it doesn't mean you're going to win on every deal. But you really have to assess it for what it is, like each deal without emotion and understand what it looks like. I would say that when I think about us being stewards of capital, that's what we are, right? We have 10, $11 billion of AUM. We really have to think about how we protect that capital. And as you said, if you're an individual investor, you're just trying to grow your capital, you're trying to grow your net worth, your AUM. I think that's a challenge, right? Because you can be in the batter's box saying, God, I haven't bought a deal in 12 months. I got to swing. Well, maybe that's not the right deal. And you're better off waiting till month 15 and then the right deal comes. And I think more often than not, people recognize, oh yeah, that's the right deal. And I'll say on the opposite side, I've had some, underwhelming institutional capital partners over the year where it's not their money. So whatever, I'll send a quarterly report. Oh, cool. How's it going? 94% occupied. Good. There's not a lot of investment, in terms of that asset preservation or capital steward. So I think as an individual, it's just, again, be disciplined, stay focused on what you're trying to accomplish. Don't swing at every pitch.
That's great advice, just staying disciplined, understanding your goals, but being patient. I like to say patiently aggressive. So we're constantly in the batter's box. We're looking at every pitch. Doesn't mean we're swinging, right? But we're not looking at, okay, well, hey, we had 7 pitches. They didn't work. Let's just go sit down and wait. Uh, yes, it's frustrating to stand up there and go through 20 pitches and not see one you like. But you kind of have to have that mindset that, hey, the 21st one might be it, right? And keep monitoring the market and keep looking. And it does take, kind of a, salesman type mentality to stay positive and stay motivated. But I think it comes back to what you talked about earlier, right? What is your mission? What is your personal goals? What are you trying to achieve? And if you're focused on those things, the patience of the work makes it a little bit easier to find the deals that work for you and your goals. You talk about just managing, 10, $11 million of AUM, right? You're dealing with a lot of properties, a lot of capital. A lot has changed over the last year or so when it comes to market conditions and investor sentiment. Um, how have you shifted or adjusted, either your approach or communications? What have you seen in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's important as, we've gotten into a market cycle where we've had a tremendous amount of supply. So if you think back to 16, 17, 18, 19, there was a lot of thrust around BTR and SFR product. We leased up one of the first deals in the West Valley in 17 for Christopher Todd Wood. And it was just kind of gaining traction with Next Metro and others. When I think about that time frame, it was almost like the perfect expansionary market. We were undersupplied. There's a lot of employment. There's a lot of in-migration from California and other states. So there was just this major tailwind, a massive tailwind for multifamily and BTR. And the narrative was, well, BTR commands, 35% more rent than traditional multifamily. Well, that just wasn't true if you looked at it from a data perspective, because they were comparing brand new BTR product against traditional multifamily 3-story garden style that was built in 2004, just because there was no additional supply in those areas over the course of, say, 10, 12 years. So that created a lot of momentum for Phoenix. And what you see today is a result of a lot of capital that was reading the tea leaves, understanding the data, understanding the narrative. Phoenix is a great place to invest. So now we're peaking in supply, and you've had a contractionary market from a ownership landlord perspective for about 2 years. It really started in November of 23, which is great for the renter, right? Rents go down, concessions go up. You can get 8 weeks free pretty much anywhere in Phoenix. And I think the folks that are really disciplined understand that there are cycles, but they're here to focus on investing long term. So I have always concerns for folks that just they want to do like a fix and flip, or I'm going to try to time it perfectly, which is usually a disaster, right? Because you get caught. You can't control a market. You're never bigger than the market. That's probably the most prominent thing I can say today. So if you have a strategy that takes your investment out over time, it's likely that you can be more successful, right? You can be more flexible with your exit strategy and not get caught. So I can speak to many groups that said, "Oh, I'm going to buy in 23. We don't care that the cost per unit's going up, cap rates are compressed, and we're just going to buy this deal. We're going to fix and flip, meaning we're going to invest in 25 units on renos and then exit, right? Kind of sell the story. We got these rental rates, and then things happen, delays happen, the market shifts, capital dries up a bit, equities not willing to write a check anymore. So you really, again, back to being disciplined, not trying to time cycles, and having a longer investment thesis, I think always wins out.
They're great tips, right? Having that longer investing thesis and really just options, but you want to be in control. And when you're trying to time the market, that's just chaotic, right? There's a lot of things that can happen there. And you also talked about just really understanding that market. So in Phoenix in particular, when you looked at the BTR space, you guys got in the front end of that trend, and it's still going strong in many markets. But there was also some miscommunication or misperceptions around just how strong the BTR space was based on some conditions that folks really didn't calculate. And I think that's always the challenge, right? It's like people see things and you read some data points and it implies that there's a great story there, but you never can control how people react. Five developers read that story, they all run out and develop, 200, BTR communities. Well, now you got 1,000, communities or 1,000 homes coming online, and maybe or maybe not, the market can absorb that. So you just never know how those things are always interpreted. But I think too, just having that big picture view and giving yourself flexibility, it's going to just mitigate some of those risks and is a better thesis for investing in general.
Yeah,
John,
John,
yeah,
let me
please.
add two things. So one, I think it goes back to, and I say this to my 14-year-old daughter, like, you got to do your homework, right? So all I mean by that is you got to understand through the data lens what's actually happening, and then be transparent. So we've had lots of tough conversations over the last 2 years with clients saying, "Hey, I know you broke ground. You're going to probably deliver during this quarter of this year. Just know there's going to be a tremendous amount of supply pressure in that specific submarket." And then really understanding what's happening in the market as a whole, macro to micro to what's happening in real estate specifically. And I love working with folks that are really educated, right? They really understand, they really care, they're really focused on their deals. So, we'll sit down in the conference room and, hey, brand new meeting. And you have a developer coming in, and it's pretty obvious or apparent right away, hey, this guy really knows, or this group really knows what's happening. Like, they're really dialed in and focused on the market. And we've always aligned better with folks that are data centric and transparent. And I think that helps the relationship both ways. And even if you're an individual investor, be transparent with yourself, look at the data, assess it. And again, maybe not get in the batter's box just to swing at every pitch. And so you might say, these deals are great, but except for these things, here's the caveat. Well, the caveat might mean keep the bat on the shoulder and then look to the next deal.
Yeah, I love it. Great tips there. If you want to learn more, follow John and his team. You can go to mark-taylor.com. We'll make sure we put a link to that as well in our show notes. John, right now we're going to transition and go to our round of insights. When you think you found a great deal, asking the right questions could be the difference in finding a stud or a dud. Listen, we've put together a new guide to help you out. It's called 7 Questions You Must Ask Before Investing in Apartments. Now, in this guide, you're going to learn how to uncover red flags, quickly identify underwriting risk, vet sponsors and team members, and confirm key assumptions. Now, this is a guide that's going to help you be a better investor, whether you're an active investor or you're a passive investor looking to partner with other operators. Asking better questions is the key to identifying great opportunities. So download this free guide. Go to our website, casmoncapital.com/7 questions. That's the number 7 questions. And you can access this free guide today. To make it easy on you, though, we've put a link in our show notes. So you go to the show notes, you can click that link and access the guide right now. This guide's going to help you make better investment choices, asking the right questions to build your portfolio. So be sure to download it today. Give us a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Well, John, do you have 10, 12 hours? I think, in business, I go back to June of 2006. We had a small portfolio, 14 assets. At the time, we were disposing of 7. We're typically a long-term holder, but the market presented itself as such, and it was kind of the peak of the market. So we transacted with a group out of California called Teachers, TICREF, and we were led to believe that we were going to stay on as managers. So think 7 properties out of 14, about half of our portfolio. And about 60% of our revenue, because they're really good assets that we developed and managed. And 2 days prior to the transaction finalizing, we received an email by mistake from leadership in the brokerage team saying Lincoln Property Management was going to manage these assets. So we were kind of blindsided. And 2 days later, I had to sit in front of 3 different communities and say, hey, sorry, we don't have a job for you. And it was 26 people. So again, you can imagine small company. There was friendships that were interlaid with leadership and coworkers, and I lost some friends during that process. And I just said, hey, going forward, we will always do a much better job of vetting the process. Like, what's it going to be? Are we going to be in or out? And more importantly, we were going to ensure that we have enough growth in our company to ensure that if this ever happened, that we could absorb those employees so they always have a place to call home. It was very personal for me. And I can say since 2006, I've never gone through a sale or a transaction where I couldn't maintain all of my employees at that 1-2 portfolio of communities. And that's important to me, because when you come to work with Mark Taylor, the Mark Taylor flag, you should have a home, because transactions happen in real estate, as you know, all the time. So the last thing I want to see is a property going out the door and I can't retain that manager, that service manager, that leasing consultant. So that really stuck with me at the time. I felt like we failed those 26 employees because we weren't prepared for that time and place transaction.
I appreciate that, John. Give us a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
Well, we waited a long time to not talk about AI, right? So the buzzword. I will say that I'm always looking for shortcuts, hacks, tools, tricks. And I think for me today, ChatGPT 4.5 is fantastic. I think the key for that is I was able to, I have a subscription, so $25 a month, but it allows you to create profiles. So I have a few profiles. I'll specifically speak to mine as CEO of Mark Taylor. I've dumped a tremendous amount of information into that profile. And now I will say I use it as almost a sounding board on information that I need, decisions, curating just different things for clients. And it's been a tremendous tool for me in terms of accelerating things, writing, all of those things to help me just be more efficient and create a faster pace for myself. And I would recommend anyone to go do that. Doesn't mean you have to run a company. Just be your personal, right? Here's John Cena. I'm going to put my information in and help me make decisions. And what I've found is it will go back to initial inputs and say, are you thinking about it this way? So it's almost like having a professor sitting next to you, and you're just bouncing ideas off. and that professor really knows you, almost like a family member. So that's been really helpful for me to create efficiencies and accelerate some of my workflows.
Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
I'd say the one I've probably recommended, I'll give a few, sorry. The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. I think that's a great kind of mental twist for yourself to create growth and really avoid immediate gratification, delaying things, thinking about things long term. Another one I love is the Jordan Peterson 12 Rules of Life. I just think there's so many things in there that helps individuals think about responsibility for themselves, eliminating the victim card, and really just taking responsibility today for yourself tomorrow. And then 7 Powers by Jeffrey Pfeffer is fantastic. So one of those 7, network relentlessly. So if I could go back to John in his 20s, I would network times 10 because it's amazing how many great people, investors, multifamily experts, anything are available to you if you network. And it's amazing what people will do and give back to you if you invest in them. So network.
Love it. Great stuff there. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
So I'm an executive coach, life coach, really. I think everyone should have a coach. It could be a best friend, it could be anyone, but you should be talking to someone. I think it's just great to bounce ideas off. But for me, I do my annual set of goals. I have a 5-year, 10-year plan, and then life plan. And I always go back to those on a monthly basis, just to how am I doing, right? You got to calibrate and assess. But every morning, I focus right away, 5 minutes. What am I grateful for? I think gratitude is a true powerful piece that creates momentum in life. So my wife and I will do 3 things of gratitude. That can change. It can be personal, it can be professional. And I just think it sets you up for the day. I think folks that think about what they don't have more than what they do have find gaps in their life, less meaning, less purpose. I think for me, I'm grateful for what I have and the people that I'm surrounded with. And I think when you have that mindset, you think about being grateful more often. It just triggers really good things in your life. It triggers good responsibility. It triggers good habits. So that's what I do in the morning. And then at work, I really try the 90-10 rule, not 80-20, like focus on the 10% that really matters. And I think as you transition in life, you think about your roles. If you're a great individual employee and now you have a team, things change. Now you run a division or a company. Now it's about accelerating the leadership, the growth of your team to your members, not just yourself. So over time, I think that's the toughest transition for people that are really good at things, right? I'm an all-star as a marketer, but now I have 10 people I got to train and get them to this level. So, I think that's something that we always have to really back into and support from a growth perspective.
Give me your number 1 insight for growth.
Be uncomfortable. I think I go back to, I failed my first year of college speech class because I was deathly afraid, even though I was captain of football, basketball, baseball teams, speaking in front of 100 people in a room. I was white knuckled, sweating profusely. I had to crawl back to my professor the sophomore year and say, hey, I got to get through this. I just think when you're willing to take responsibility for your future self, that means you're going to put yourself in uncomfortable positions today. And when you're uncomfortable and you get through it, that's growth, right? If you have to put yourself in those situations. So that's the only way to evolve as a human, a leader, a co-worker. That's critical to success. And I think a piece of that is just, if you can sacrifice things today for tomorrow, you'll benefit. I remember when I was a brand new manager, I bought a BMW, used BMW. I thought, I wanted to be that $30,000 millionaire. And every time I took it in for service, not to pick on BMW, they fixed 2 things. There were 5 more things wrong with it. So I found myself drowning in car payments and car repairs. And, if I would have just said, you know what, it's okay to have my Honda of 200,000 miles until I'm capable of really building enough wealth to buy a different car. So I think delayed gratification is a big piece of future success for myself and anybody who's listening.
I love it, man. Great stuff. Well, let's go in a different direction. You're out in Arizona. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Ooh, it's a foodie town, whether people know it or not. There's so many phenomenal restaurants. I would say Steak 44. If you have the stomach to buy a $60 steak, but that experience is remarkable. Now the food's tremendous. I think it's one of the best steakhouses in the country. But what blows me away is the level of consistency from a service perspective. It's always 5-star. And I've been there, 150 times probably over the last 15 years or how long they've been open. And I think that's one thing that always gets me to go back. Much like Houston's, similar footprint in terms of service and quality.
Steak 44, you said, right?
Yes.
All right, we have to put that on a list. Check that out. John, you give us a lot of great stuff, man. I absolutely love hearing your story, man. It's just one that's very inspirational, going from a resident to the CEO and talking about the growth, the steps along the way, having to make yourself uncomfortable, some of the lessons you learned. And also, we didn't dive into this specifically, but company culture came through a lot in what you talked about, especially when you talked about that project or selling 7 of those properties and losing 26 of your employees and how that was such a painful thing for you and losing relationships. So it's very clear that culture is really, really important to you, helping people understand their own personal journey. What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do professionally? What are you trying to do personally? That culture really came through. And I just want to point that out because I'm not sure if everybody picked up on that. But I think it's really important as entrepreneurs to keep that in mind, especially if you have employees and you have other people on the team. Building a culture is really, really key. So I appreciate you talking about that today. And then lastly, just really understanding some of the nuances from, working with institutional level investors who are focused a bit more on protecting the assets that they have versus if you are kind of growing your assets, mom and pop, syndicator, really trying to grow, but making sure that you are clear on your deal criteria. What is your buy box? Get clarity on that because that's going to save you, especially when the market starts to shift. So really, really great insights. Again, if folks want to learn more, they can check out your website, mark-taylor.com. John, I want to thank you again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.